Different's great, but being different for the sake of being different, I'm not a big fan of, right? If you just want to be different for the sake
technology
of it.
Technology, I would hide behind it.
And you start to hear some of their challenges, and yes.
Because it speaks to the core of who you are and what drives you forward. Because what makes you different is what drives you.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Master Connector Show. I'm your co-host, Rob Genovese, and I just want to welcome you, and hopefully you are tuning in every single week. We come at you every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, bringing you a whole slew of great guests who are going to give you pieces of their journey, experiences, insights into their occupation and their industry and what they do to help you become better, overcome and win. Because in the Master Connector Show, we're all about connectivity, connecting with others. We're all about building community, helping others, helping one another. And, look, as far as we're concerned, me and Steve, my co-host, I'll bring him on in a little bit. We're two former shy guys, two introverts who didn't have a clue about how to network, how to connect, how to build business. But we came together with some common mentors, and we're going to learn about that in a bit. But I just want to say today, I want to thank Russ Hedge Consulting. This episode is sponsored by Russ Hedge and Russ Hedge Consulting. Look, Russ is going to help you. You need to transform your business. You need to connect to new customers. Give our buddy Russ Hedge a call. You can contact him on LinkedIn. You can go to his website, russhedge.com, and let him help you transform your business. Thank you, Russ Hedge. So listen, as I was saying, we didn't start out, Steve and I, as people who are connecting. In fact, we were probably, if people took a vote, I think Steve would agree, we're probably the least likely to succeed in business, the least likely to have many relationships, the least likely to be big networkers. But, look, everything is a skill. And what you don't know now, you can learn today and tomorrow and for the rest of your life, as long as you're willing to learn. But we're going to get into a bit of that today, because today's a little different. We don't have a guest for you today. We're actually each other's guests. So we're going to talk to each other. Steve and I are going to have a loose conversation. We're going to talk about authenticity. We're going to talk about influence. We're going to tell you and talk to you about our journey, about two guys who didn't have a clue, who got a clue, were able to overcome and, build successful relationships in business. So I'm going to bring him on, my co-host, longtime friend for 26 years, the Master Connector, Mr. Steve Spiro. What's up, Steve?
What's up, Rob? How you doing, bud? This is awesome that we're going to get to do this just solo, you and I. And we've been planning and talking about doing it for a while, but it's crazy because we're booked out like till May of 2025 with guests. So it's actually a blessing when somebody last minute says, "Hey, I can't make the show," and so it gives us a chance to kind of jump in and do it together. But it's been a blessing to have you as a friend for that many years. There was a little gap in our communication, so to speak, not because of anything other than we just sort of life, changed, life kind of got in the way, but it's been really cool to be able to come together and do this with you and partner with you on the show here. So excited. So what's going on, friends? Steve Spiro, the Master Connector, coming at you live and direct. And listen, this is, as Rob said, he did a great job, setting this up. This is the Master Connector show. So if you're joining us live, we don't know you are here unless you get in the comments. So please put in the comments where you're from, what city, what state, what country. We also encourage you to connect with each other. So if you get in there in the comments, connect with the person that you see on the, also in the comments, and, look how you can add value with each other, right? Again, this is all about connection. It's all about building community. So we're excited about that. So just make sure you do that. And if you have questions for Rob and I, as we go through the show, put them in the comments and let us know, and we'll get to those questions as well. But I want to talk to you a little bit about something here today. So building authentic influence is at the heart of creating meaningful and lasting connections, something I love speaking about on stage for sure. True influence isn't about power or manipulation. No, it's about being genuine, transparent, and consistent on how you show up for others. So crucial, right? When you lead with authenticity, and I'm big on that, the show is built on that. People sense your sincerity. and trust forms and the foundation of your strong network. Like, and we'll share a little bit on this in a bit. But I have a mentor still to this day, do, and he is charismatic, funny, and I didn't have those things, right? Rob could be a little humorous and funny at times. I didn't. I'm one of those dry humor guys. Half the people don't even get my jokes. But one thing about me is I've always been sincere. So I figured I'm going to lead with sincerity and authenticity. And that's been a big sort of platform for me, if you will. But listen, this kind of influence grows naturally because it's rooted in who you are, not just what you do. So important, right? I love finding out about somebody and who they are, not necessarily what they do. So by staying true to your values and consistently delivering value to others. It's all about adding value, being others focused, right? We speak on that a lot. You build a reputation that attracts like minded individuals and opportunities. And I got to say, this has been the last 3.5 years since I really went all in with this mentality of being others focused. It's been the best 3.5 years of my entire life. And ultimately, in today's world where people crave realness, being authentic is not just an option, it's a necessity. So you want to embrace your true self and find that authentic influence, and people will follow you. So, again, different show today. If you're ready, put in the comments. And by the way, hello, Yolanda. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you for being a supporter here. Yolanda checking in from Texas. But if you're ready, community, make sure you type in the hashtag. Let's go, because Rob and I are going to banter back and forth. It's going to be a great show, very different for the show, but I think it's going to be incredible. So let's bring it on back on, my buddy, Mr. Rob G.
All right, good to see you, Steve. I am excited. It's one thing to have people on the show to hear their perspectives. I mean, but I think maybe a lot of people probably don't realize that we do have a lot to share, and maybe as hosts we don't really talk about that because we want to showcase other people. The fact is, both of us have pretty wild stories.
Yeah.
That we go back, like I said, 26 years. We both knew each other way back when. And then here we are today, and it's like, oh boy, what a journey.
Yeah, I'd love to hear, Rob, your, kind of your perspective on kind of how that started, right, for you, like where you were when you and I first kind of met, and where you were, and I know lots have changed since then, but maybe a little bit of your backstory, and maybe I'll have a chance to tell mine.
Yeah, so everybody, Steve and I met 26 years ago, and we came together through common business organization, and we were both new to it for the most part. Steve had an advertising agency, but I came from, I only have a degree in graphic design at the time. In fact, that's my only degree, really. I guess if you want to say an official, certification or degree from an institution like a university, but everything else I learned along the way through various channels. But I was looking to own a business. Now, I didn't come from an entrepreneurial family. I came from, we were all W-2 people. We worked. My dad's advice to me, as it was by many years ago, was, go to school, get a good education, get a good job, and work for a company for your entire life and get a pension, because that's what his generation did and could do. And here's what's interesting, Steve. So I think I was a little halfway through college, and things started changing. My dad was 51 when he got the golden parachute from AT&T. He was a supervisor for over 30 years, and they said, "Hey, you can either," this is essentially what they said. They said, "Here, you can take this sweet package with this pension and these benefits and all this, or not." And he goes, "Well, what happens if I don't?" They're like, "Or you don't get anything, and you probably get let go anyway." So he's like, "I think I'll take the package."
Yeah.
So, but
Absolutely.
what he realized, he actually understood that. He goes, "Wait a minute." He goes, "This seems to be a trend." So you know what he said to me? You know what his advice was? And look, this is not a slam on my late father, but he was like, "I don't know what to tell you." He goes, "It doesn't work anymore. So you kind of have to figure it out."
Yeah.
And by the way, that was his famous saying, you got to figure stuff out. So I had to figure it out. So all I knew was, Steve, I want to own a business because I wanted two things out of life. I wanted the flexibility, time, and the ability to make as much money as I could make, because
Right.
I wanted freedom. And that's how we came together, right? Freedom.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And listen, I could relate to some of that, right? My dad, um, he started out in the W-2 world, and because he just didn't have really good skills that would really support a family, he kind of was forced, if you will, into going into a business. And I found out as I was an adult that he looked into like chock full of nuts and other kinds of businesses, and found out going into a liquor store business with my step grandfather. And so my experience of entrepreneurship was yes, my dad was an employee, was an owner, but I looked at him as more of an employee that owned a business. Really, he was not necessarily a true entrepreneur. He kind of treated his business much like he had a job, but he happened to just be the owner, right? And so I don't think I wanted to do that. I didn't want to get into the liquor industry. I saw the crazy hours he was dealing with. Never took sick time or vacation. But I did want to do more. And you guys know, again, this is the show today is about authenticity. So I was bullied. I was learning disabled, dyslexic. I had a lot of shortcomings. I used to lock myself in my room because there was some drama in my household, and parents got divorced, and one or two friends, and they moved away, and there was like nobody. It was like my friends were characters on TV. It was just crazy. And so, but I knew there was something more and bigger for me. And so I eventually had talent. Like you, Rob, I had went to school for graphic design, and I went to high school of art and design, Parsons School of Design, got out, but I couldn't get a job. So I took fate in my own hands and started a company. It was an advertising company with a partner. We had an office in the city, and it was great. And then I started training the martial arts as well, and eventually got a couple black belts. And my wife is a black belt too, crazy enough, but had a karate studio. But all those things were sort of, they were not. They ultimately, I still was struggling, and I think when we came together, Rob, I was already in working at a large marketing firm in Greenwich, Connecticut, and I knew there was something more for me in my life. And I found that there was, I still didn't know how to connect. I had horrible people skills. They were starting to get a little bit better, but I didn't know how to. I would rather beat you up than connect with you and have a conversation with you. I mean, I wasn't an aggressive guy. I wasn't a bully in any way, but I just didn't know how to connect with people. And we came together, and obviously, as you mentioned, Rob, we have a similar mentor who is still in my life today, and challenged me to meet three strangers every day. And it's just been a crazy journey since then. And since then, I've now grown this huge network, and obviously, now inspirational speaker. I do consulting. And I love having the show, and just wrote a book too. So it's just crazy where we are today. It's such a contrast to both of us. I look at you, and I remember when we met 25, 26 years ago. And then I think back on my background, and it's crazy where we are today. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of what you said there, how we started out, and maybe audience members can relate to this. If you can, please get in the comments and tell us, because we know we're not the only ones. I mean, certainly I was bullied as a kid because I was very quiet, and that doesn't translate to making friends. It doesn't translate to influence, for sure, right? There's some people, they think they say their leaders are born, not made, and that's not true, obviously, because we both gone on to lead organizations and businesses and whatnot, and we didn't start out that way. But I think the whole thing about influence was a new concept to me, because I was just trying to develop some confidence in the beginning. So when we came together in direct sales, what I actually saw, I saw, yes, owning my own business, yes, making money. But the thing that got me so excited was learning from people who had supreme confidence, and not just in themselves, but around other people, which translated to influence. And so that was what I was actually after, because I knew if I could develop self-confidence, and then confidence that people would be influenced by, my positive opportunities, then I could win. And I really wanted a win in life. And that was the thing that I was really after. So, one of the things when you talk about, being introvert, being shy, I remember this. Here's a short story to show you what I was like in high school, because even my wife doesn't really understand. She met me. I was cocky. I was not confident at the time. I was still learning. but I was out of high school for a couple of years, and I was playing racquetball at the time. And so I'm at this racquetball club, right? And I'm in there, and I'm about to go in the court, and I'm tying my sneakers. And there's a guy sitting on the bench across from me, and he's getting ready too. And I look up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I know this guy. So, I developed a little bit of confidence. So normally I'd be like, I'd be out of there. I would run because I don't know what to say and I'm scared. But I'm like, hey, Mike, right? He goes, yeah. I go, oh, Rob Genovese, how you doing? He goes, good. You know what that looked like? I don't know you. And I'm like, yeah, Mike, Rob Genovese. We went to high school together. He's like, okay. I'm like, we our names both start with G. We were in the same homeroom together in high school. He's like, I think. I'm like, Mike, you lived in the house behind me in the neighborhood.
Wow.
At that moment, I realized I was the invisible man. I
Yeah.
literally was invisible to people who should have known me just by proximity. And that freaked me out. So I'm like, I wanted to go from invisible to invincible. I wanted to not be this aggressive, people get in my way type thing. I always want to work with people, but I wanted to be able to show up confidently with skills, get results, and work with people. So, that
That's
whole
beautiful.
idea of influence was new to me.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, and community, I know we like to have your participation. So to type in that in the comments, hashtag authentic, because I want to talk about authentic influence, right? And before I do that, I want to just address Yolanda's question here. So she said, Steve, when you start your advertising business, how did you approach your potential clients? This was hardcore old school stuff, to be honest with you. My my partner, Peter, found a book, and it was a book on cold calling, and literally this introvert, and I learned how to have like 2 or 3 minutes worth of muscles on the phone because we had a book, and I remember it was a particular script, and I even remember the rebuttal. And it's funny because I even use this to this day. The rebuttal started with, "Well, that's very good, Joe, but did you know?" That was the rebuttal, right? And so I just literally we pounded the phone and made appointments, and that's how we started to build our client base. It's just crazy, the old fashioned cold call. But anyway, regarding for me, yeah, I was also the invisible man, had no friends. Little transparency. My high school experience, I commuted from the suburbs of New York City into the city. So literally, the only time I'd see these people would be in class, if that. And if there was no relationship that was built. And when you have high school where you're at least it's community based, it's in the neighborhood. There's at least that's like you said, your high school buddy from your homeroom lived behind you. We were in different suburbs. We were not even anywhere near each other, right? And so, but it sort of facilitated for me, the lack of connection. I Because I was so broken and wounded as an individual, as a human, I didn't mind when people didn't get close to me because if you were close to me, you were a threat. You could potentially hurt me. So, and then I went into college, went to Parsons School of Design, New School, same commuting in. Again, no community. There was really nominal dorm rooms. This is a standalone few buildings in New York City. So there was no like campus. I mean, the streets were the campus. It's crazy. So again, no connection. So when it comes to authenticity and building influence, the contrast today is what I start to share with is which if you could start to become authentic in terms of how you communicate, whether you're doing posts, I often tend to tell stories in my post and share those some of those vulnerabilities. Whether you're on a connect call with somebody that you meet, however it is through LinkedIn, or whether it be somehow you meet them in the networking or whatnot, you want to share some of those vulnerabilities, and that's when you start to have influence on people because they start to see your heart. They start to see you as not just this person who has a job or business, and your identity is your business or your job. No, you become who you are based upon your experience, your shortcomings, and your strengths. and then you start to make impact on people. And again, I may have shared this already at one point in the show, but as I was having these connect calls, 10, 11, 12, or well, it felt like 10, 11, 12 a day. It probably wasn't that many. A lot of these connect calls during COVID, during the lockdown, people were sharing with me, and they were getting emotional. They were tearing up. They were like, "Steve, I've told you stories that I've told almost nobody, and I'm telling you, the stranger I met through whatever." So I believe influence. When you think of influence, a lot of times you're thinking about this big picture, like, but it could just be how you're touching people's lives. And to your point, Rob, they remember you later, like, "Oh yeah, you're the guy that," right? Versus who? Yeah, really? To me, that and through being authentic, you create real influence on people. I'd love your perspective on that. And
Yeah.
and I have one question for you, Rob, in light of that. And so, community, type in hashtag true, because Rob, I'd love to know how you begin to influence while staying true to yourself. Right?
Yeah, I mean that's actually a good question. It's not an easy answer because I think I was so lost in trying to find out who I was. There's that old saying, he had to go off to find himself. He had to go to college, or he had to, go on a road trip to find himself. And while there's some kind of a little bit of eye rolling in that, there's a lot of truth to finding out who you are. Now, I spent 25 years in corporate America, and so they teach you how to be. You have to dress a certain way. You have to behave a certain way. You have to use certain language. You have to be a certain way, or you actually risk getting demoted, held down, fired even. And so within the confines of that, I still didn't know who I was because I was wearing this mask. I mean, I was inside. I didn't have to travel for business. I was inside working for a publishing company for a lot of those years. And the way I developed influence, because I still didn't know the kind of person I wanted to be, I was imitating you, Steve, and I was imitating Ed, and I was imitating Hugh, and I was imitating all these guys that were around me who had influence because I didn't know what was my true influence. Where was my authenticity? I didn't have it yet. But the
Right.
way I started developing influence, and this is really interesting, if you're like me and you're extremely, you're introverted, maybe you're really shy. In corporate, what I discovered was in building relationships with everybody in all different departments in the company, not just in my couple of departments. I developed relationships. And to your point, even though it was in a business setting, they would share things with me about the company.
Mm,
Sometimes stuff that shouldn't have been repeated, sometimes
wow.
not. But what happened was I started to know the inner workings of everything.
Mm,
And what I noticed was people would come to me because I always had the answers and I always knew what was happening and what was going to happen. And so they would come and be like, hey, can I get a word with you? Now, people that I was not friends with, just associates. Be like, hey, can I get a word with you? I'm like, sure, what's up? They're like, hey, and they would ask me these questions and like, do you know how to, and do you know anything about, and that happened a lot. So there's this influence you develop by being the person who knows what's going on. Now, that was a
mm,
big transition for me because I was the guy, I think a long time, you probably heard this, there's three types of people in the world. Those who know what's happening, those who make things happen, and those who go, "What happened?" Right? That was me. I was the "What happened" guy. I missed it, but I was starting to be in the know, and that made me start to understand influence. The authenticity didn't come till years later, honestly,
yeah.
when I went on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. I can relate to, big time to that. And, you know, in terms of like what you're speaking about when I was in the advertising corporate side, I, I was like, I pride myself on not being the water cooler guy and just keeping out of all that stuff. And I probably would have been smarter to be in tune to all that stuff because, you probably know the story, but 9/11 hit. A week later, I was laid off and I now had, this very strong income that was gone, and it was crazy. But for me, and I want to talk community a little bit about challenges here. So type in the sorry challenges here because we all have them, right? And here's the question, right? How do you maintain authenticity while you're growing your influence? To me, it's first of all, it wasn't easy for me. I got to say, in the beginning, again, as this guy that was wounded, I didn't want you to know my deep dark secrets. I didn't want you to know I was going through challenges. It was easier for me to just sort of hide them. But then, and Rob, when you met me, I'm sure you kind of, maybe you can remember some of this, maybe not. And I appreciate the kind words saying you're trying to be like me, maybe the more newer version of me, maybe, but the old me was closed off, was sort of stoic, because again, it was my default was to protect those things. So we all go through challenges, but now I found that when you share some of those challenges, and it's a little better when you share challenges after you've overcome them. I've learned that versus what you're in the middle of. But to me, that's been the biggest thing that has helped create influence is, number one, breaking through those challenges. And one way to do it is a big part of the pillar of the show, which is grit, is having the grit to overcome those challenges. But secondarily is eventually sharing it, because you know what? Many people could learn from the challenges that we've gone through. And I believe that's the key here is when that happens,
And
right?
one of the things I want to point out that I you know always respected about you, and I always believed that you were further ahead than me, even though I believe it's true. I know you say not necessarily, but you had already achieved something, and I'm not even talking about the business part because that was something that was a dream of mine. You had already done it, um, but you have two black belts in two different martial arts disciplines, and they're multiple degree black belts. And when I met you, you had those, and your wife had those, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And you're humble. You were quiet. Not that you're loud now, but like we can both talk to people, so we're not quiet anymore. But you had that, so you had a win. And I think when it comes to influence, you have to have a win under your belt if you want to influence anybody. So tell me how maybe the martial arts achievement helped you in anything after that, if so.
Oh, it's helped in so many ways. Too many. I know we're getting to the bottom of the hour here. So many, it's going to be impossible. But I just say this: the one thing I learned is, and I cultivated that grit, and I learned that if you don't quit, you win. That's the biggest thing. If you just stay steady, don't you do the work, you get mentorship from the right people, and you stay steady, you'll make it. And that's probably the biggest one, right? Fear is a liar. A lot of time, fear, false evidence appearing real, right? You feel the fear and do it anyway, and all those things. I was not very talented, but it gave me the ability to just I outworked everybody. I worked hard. I didn't quit. And I think that's the differentiator in it, not just in the martial arts, but in life. So that's been a big thing for me. I want to kind of shift gears here. I want to slip one in here. Rob, you're the branding guy, right? So community, type in hashtag brand, and then I want to slip this in. Yeah, you build strong brands. So here's the question for you. And how does personal branding play a role in authentic influence? I'd love to hear your perspective on that, if you would.
So yeah, I appreciate the question, and you teed it up, even though I know you weren't meaning to. But when I spoke about influence earlier and having to find the authenticity, that didn't come till years later. It didn't, and the authenticity came out of, and the personal branding. The answer to your question is this: when it comes to personal branding, right? People think you got to get one. You already have one. It's deep down inside. It's part of your inner core. The problem is two things are at play. Number one, if you were like me and you were taught to wear a mask, most people are wearing masks. We know this, but I had the good soldier corporate mask. I had to recognize it was still on even after I left and rip it off. And I mean, in an aggressive way. So you understand, wow, that's not who I am. And it wasn't who I was. And I was grappling with that because I was not getting business when I went into business for myself. And I realized here's why. When I left corporate and I opened up, my first company was a website design company before I started branding, really. I was like you are dressed right now. That's how I dressed. But, and folks, if you can't see it, Steve's got he's got a button down collared shirt. He's got the jacket on. He's probably got matching slacks, leather belt, shoes to match. He's got the kerchief in the pocket. Like, and look, and there's nothing wrong with that. My point is this: that's how I dressed for corporate. When I went on my own, I was portraying that image and everything that goes along with it. So I was clean shaven. I was using all the corporate jargon, which is all the usual stuff that everybody was hearing, which was very mainstream. And I projected my company that way. And I got ignored. I got no calls. Nobody reacted. Nobody reached out. Nothing. And I thought something was wrong. Now we're running out of time, but what I discovered was I started thinking more along brand strategy, but didn't know it. And I thought, well, this is not working. And how do I get something that's more authentic? Because this doesn't feel right. And so what I did was, it was an experiment actually in the beginning. How do I get a real brand? So I developed a brand strategy process that I learned from all the greats. I didn't go to university for it, but I read books, videos, took courses. I did everything that, a college would ask you to do. I did it on my own time. Yep. And when I put myself through that process, out the other side came my first branding company, Unleash My Beast brand, which was built on the premise that you need to recognize that you probably have fear. You need to kick it aside and you need to reach down, pull out of your inner core who you really are. And what I discovered was, and outwardly, these are the telltale signs. So, my hair, my facial hair, I got sideburns, I got a goatee, I got a mustache. I probably look scary to some people. I wear ripped jeans, I wear old vintage Henley t-shirts. I got like leather bands on my wrist, because this is kind of who I am. And so my brands, my personal brand, that's who I am. So I show up as who I am, and I echo it through the words I use, the imagery I use, all that stuff. But the point is this, Steve, it came from deep down inside. So when people go, you got to be authentic. So they put up this logo and they put up this picture of them next to a fancy car. They think that's authenticity because they're portraying something. It's not. No, people are attracted to you for you. But if you don't know who that is yet, not going to connect.
Agreed. Absolutely. Well, this is great. We can go on and on. This is amazing. By the way, if you're open to, you'd like to learn all the up and coming shows, go to masterconnector.show. You could also look at being a sponsor of a show. Next week, we're going to have an incredible guest, Karen Loftus, episode 177, same bat time, same bat channel. The Exchange of Change can be a great show. And I want to close with one last thing, and we'll close this out. Right in the early days of Airbnb, co-founders Joe Gebbia faced skepticism about the idea of renting out air mattresses in strangers' homes. Go figure, right? Rather than retreating, Gebbia focused on authentic connection, personally reaching out to hosts and guests to understand their needs and concerns. This, genuine approach not only built trust, but also laid the foundation for a company culture centered on community, showing how real connection can turn a bold idea into a global success, inspiring others to stay true to their vision. Remember, folks, always be authentic and always shine your light. And we'll see you next week. God bless.
And you start to hear some of their challenges, and yes,
because it speaks to the core of who you are and what drives you forward. Because what makes you different is what drives